So here we are with my second review of this year's Melbourne International Comedy Festival, and the comedian I'm taking a look at today is Jon Walpole, who's got this fantastic show called which is on all throughout the comedy festival at Lantern Lounge out in Collingwood. Now, you'll remember last year that I went along and absolutely fell in love with the comedy trio that Jon was involved with. So I was going into this show with some very, very high expectations. And those high expectations were met. You're always kind of scared when you're going into a show expecting something great, because you never really know if you're going into it with this high expectations and you're going to be disappointed because the show is good but it's not great like you expected. Well, that was not something that I had to worry about at all with Jon's show, because Jon's show was absolutely brilliant. So this time around it's kind of Jon and his sound guy, who plays a pretty big part in this, not only from playing the huge amount of sounds that Jon needs throughout his show, but also the sound guy and Jon have a lot of interactions as well. And Jon's characters in this show was absolutely top notch. Loved characters like hand sanitizer guy, things like that. Love Jon's style of comedy. I love the fact that he can stand up and deliver a line, but he can also use mime, acting, and a whole bunch of other different ways to make you laugh. Like most of the shows that I saw this week, midweek, there was only a kind of a medium-sized crowd there for Jon, but he was getting laughs all of the time. The interplay between him and his audio guy is absolutely fantastic. Loved it. Sometimes you can kind of see that stuff and think, oh, that's a bit old. But nah, this worked absolutely brilliantly. Love the characters that Jon does. Love Jon's facial expressions. If anything else, you will laugh at Jon's facial expressions all throughout this show. The other thing we learnt with Jon as well is that he's a comedian that can think on the spot. There was a few things that happened on the night that I was there. For those that have been to the basement at Lantern Lounge, you'll know there's a pretty low roof. At one point, Jon jumped and hit his head on the roof, and he incorporated that into part of the show. There was another bit later on where my Popcorn Conspiracy co-host and I, Kyle, were talking, and we said that at one point the people upstairs in the restaurant moved chairs, and you could hear it on the roof, and without missing a beat, Jon incorporated it into the show to the point where Kyle actually thought that it was one of the audio sound effects. That is what you want from a comedian that can think on their feet when stuff like that happens. And you love those off-the-cuff moments. It's those off-the-cuff moments that quite often make a show something very, very special, and it's what worked here with Jon's show. It's not just the off-the-cuff stuff with Jon, though. His script was absolutely fantastic. His characters were great. There's never, ever a dead skit when it comes to Jon Walpole. All of his skits work. Sure, some get bigger laughs than others, but there's never anywhere you're like, oh, that didn't kind of work. They all worked, and he just puts on an absolutely amazing show. I think he's one of those comedians that I just know is going to make it big. I'm going to be going to see him in 5-6 years' time, and I'm sure I'm going to have to be going to the Arts Centre or the Athenaeum Theatre or somewhere like that to see him, because he's one of those comedians that's going to keep on growing and growing an audience to the point where, look, I could see him on TV, I could see him in films down the track. He is such an amazing comedian. He's so gifted, and I cannot wait to see where he ends up. So go along and see him now with this new show. And go and see and support one of Australia's most promising comedians with a huge career ahead of him. I'm going to give this show 5 stars again. I know I gave their show last year 5 stars, but I thought this was an absolutely brilliant show that had me laughing from start to finish. So 5 stars.